The rain had turned the dirt road into a ribbon of mud, thick and shining under the weak glow of the lantern outside the boarding house. Each drop struck the ground with a dull persistence, as if the night itself was trying to wear the town down. Clara Hayes stood beneath the edge of the awning, her shawl pulled tight around her shoulders. It was an old habit now, that motion of guarding herself, as though cold and judgment were the same thing. Since her husband's death 3 months earlier, both seemed to find her wherever she went. People passed her without stopping. Some nodded with stiff politeness, others pretended not to see her at all. Widowhood had made her visible in the wrong ways and invisible in the ways that mattered. She felt it most keenly tonight, with the harvest supper only a few steps away. Laughter and music drifted through the wooden walls of the hall, warm and alive, everything she felt she no longer was. She told herself she could turn back. Pride urged her to go home, to make do with what little she had and accept the quiet punishment the town imposed on women who stood alone. But the memory of the committee man's voice stopped her cold. Widows shouldn't attend unaccompanied. It sets a bad example. The threat that followed had been said gently, almost kindly, which made it worse. No supper, no winter allotment. No mercy. Clara's gaze drifted to the hitching post across the road, where a man stood with a chestnut horse. He was brushing its coat with long, careful strokes, murmuring something too soft for her to hear. He moved with an ease that suggested confidence without arrogance, strength without cruelty. His coat was plain, his boots worn but well cared for. Nothing about him demanded attention, yet something about him held it. Her heart began to pound. The idea formed fully before she could stop it, terrifying and humiliating all at once. She squeezed her eyes shut, then opened them again. The man was still there. The horse flicked its tail. The night waited. Before courage could abandon her completely, Clara stepped off the awning and crossed the road, her boots sinking into the mud. Halfway there, she almost turned back. Her throat felt tight, her cheeks already burning with imagined rejection. But desperation had its own momentum, and it carried her forward. Sir. Her voice trembled despite her effort to steady it. The man looked up, surprised but not annoyed. He straightened slowly, setting the brush aside, and tipped his hat just enough to be polite. His eyes were a clear, steady brown, and when he spoke his voice was calm, unhurried. Evening, ma'am. For a moment, the words deserted her. Rain dripped from the brim of his hat. The horse shifted, warm breath fogging the air. Clara forced herself to speak before the chance vanished. I know this is improper, she said quickly, the confession tumbling out. And strange. But I wondered if you might help me. Just for tonight. He studied her now, not rudely, but carefully, as though he were listening before she finished speaking. Help how? Her hands clenched beneath her shawl. Could you pretend to be my husband? The rain seemed louder in the silence that followed. He blinked once, clearly caught off guard, then let out a slow breath. That's a bold request. I wouldn't ask if I had another choice, she said, shame creeping into her voice despite her resolve. There's a supper tonight. The committee won't allow me in alone. They say it's for propriety, but it's really punishment. If I don't go, they'll cut my rations. I'll struggle to make it through winter. She waited for him to laugh, or scoff, or step away. Instead, he leaned against the post, folding his arms loosely, giving her his full attention. And you thought I'd agree? I thought, she said quietly, that you looked like someone kind. Something shifted in his expression then, subtle but unmistakable. He glanced once toward the hall, then back at her. What's your name? Clara. Clara Hayes. Daniel Reed, he replied. And I don't usually pretend to be something I'm not. Her heart sank. I understand. I'm sorry for bothering you. She turned, already bracing herself for the familiar ache of disappointment, when his voice stopped her. But I don't much like bullies, either. Especially when they dress cruelty up as decency. She looked back, hope flickering like the lantern flame. I mean, he said, pushing away from the post, that if all you need is a husband for one evening, I can stand beside you. No payment required. Relief hit her so hard her knees nearly gave out. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know how to repay you. Don't, he said simply. Let's get you out of the rain. As they walked toward the hall, Daniel offered his arm when the mud grew thick, his grip steady and respectful. Clara felt keenly aware of every small detail, the warmth of his sleeve beneath her fingers, the solid presence at her side, the way people glanced at them and then looked away. She found herself talking, words spilling out now that the tension had cracked. She told him about her husband, Thomas, about the mill accident that had taken him without warning. She spoke of the loneliness that followed, of how neighbors had brought food at first and then slowly stopped coming by. Daniel listened without interruption, his gaze forward, his pace matched to hers. When they reached the hall, he paused at the door. One question, he said softly. Are you all right with this? Truly. She met his eyes. I don't want pity, she said. I just want to be treated like I still belong. He nodded once. Then that's exactly how we'll walk in. Inside, the warmth hit her immediately, heat, light, music, the rich smell of food. Conversations faltered as heads turned. Clara's pulse thundered in her ears. Instinctively, she stiffened, ready for judgment. Then Daniel's hand settled at the small of her back, firm and protective without being possessive. Evening, he said pleasantly to the room. My wife and I are glad to be here. The word wife echoed through her, unexpected and powerful. She felt herself straighten, not from pride but from something like relief. They moved through the hall together, and Daniel played the role with an ease that astonished her. He greeted people with polite warmth, deflected intrusive questions with humor, spoke of their place in a way that revealed nothing yet invited no challenge. When Clara stumbled over her words, he filled the silence naturally, never drawing attention to her nerves. At the long tables, he praised her contributions to the town, speaking of her resilience as though it were an established fact. When one of the committee men made a pointed remark about widows being a burden, Daniel's smile stayed calm, but his voice sharpened just enough to carry authority. My wife, he said evenly, has carried more than most men in this room. And she's done it with grace. A hush followed, then murmurs of agreement. Clara blinked, fighting tears. No one had defended her like that since Thomas died. For the rest of the evening, she almost forgot it was an act. Almost. The night air felt cooler when they stepped outside, as though the warmth of the hall had been holding its breath and finally let go. The rain had thinned to a mist, drifting softly instead of falling, and the mud beneath their feet glistened in the lantern light. Clara paused just beyond the door, the sounds of laughter and music fading behind her. For a moment, she simply stood there, unsure of how to return to being alone again. Daniel released his hand from the door and turned to face her. Without the eyes of the town on them, he looked different, less like a role being played, more like a man who had chosen to stay longer than expected. You did well in there, he said. She let out a shaky breath that turned into a quiet laugh. I don't think I breathed properly the entire evening. You fooled them, he said. And more importantly, they listened. Clara wrapped her shawl tighter around herself. Now that the immediate danger had passed, exhaustion crept in, heavy and sudden. I can't thank you enough, she said. You gave me more than a meal tonight. You gave me a voice. Daniel studied her for a moment, then glanced down the road where his horse waited. There's something I should tell you, he said slowly. Before this goes any further. Her stomach tightened. All right. I wasn't honest earlier. Not directly, at least. He removed his hat, turning it in his hands. I'm not a hired hand or a drifter passing through town. I own land west of here. The Reed Ranch. The words didn't register at first. Then they did, all at once. She stared at him. The Reed Ranch. Her voice dropped. That's one of the largest properties in the county. Yes. Understanding rushed in, followed quickly by heat in her cheeks. So you're rich, she said flatly. He winced slightly. I suppose by some measures. That wasn't what I wanted you to see first. A sharp mix of emotions surged through her, embarrassment, anger, and a familiar, bitter fear. If I'd known, she said, I never would have asked you. I didn't want charity, Mr. Reed. I didn't want a wealthy man playing hero for a poor widow. He stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. I know, he said. That's why I didn't tell you. Not because I wanted to deceive you, but because I wanted the choice to be honest. You asked me for dignity, not money. And that mattered. She searched his face, looking for condescension, for amusement, for anything that would confirm her worst suspicions. She found none of it. His expression was open, almost vulnerable, as though her judgment mattered to him more than he was willing to admit. I've spent years being treated like a problem to be solved, she said quietly. Like someone people help just to feel better about themselves. That's not what this was, he replied without hesitation. You stood up tonight. I just stood beside you. Silence settled between them, not awkward but heavy with things unsaid. The lantern flickered, casting long shadows on the road. Clara thought of her small house, the empty chair by the hearth, the nights she'd gone to bed afraid of the future pressing in on her from all sides. You said you leave tomorrow, she said at last. Yes. His jaw tightened slightly. Business at the ranch. I hadn't planned to stay in town this long. She nodded, bracing herself. Then this is where we part. It doesn't have to be, he said gently. I don't mean promises or grand gestures. Just a letter. A visit, if you'd allow it. Not as a benefactor. As a man who enjoyed your company. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. Hope was a dangerous thing, she had learned. It crept in softly and shattered loudly. You don't owe me anything, she said. I know, he answered. That's why I'm asking, not offering. She looked down at their feet, then back up at him. I don't know how to be someone's wife again, she admitted. Even pretending tonight felt like stepping into another life. Daniel's voice softened. I'm not asking you to be anyone but yourself. The honesty in his words undid something in her. For months, she had been holding herself together with careful restraint, afraid that if she leaned too hard into feeling, she would break. Now, tears welled despite her effort to stop them. I miss being seen, she said, her voice breaking. Not as a widow, not as a burden, just as me. He reached out, hesitated, then gently took her hand. His touch was warm, steady, asking rather than claiming. I see you, he said. The simple certainty of it made her chest ache. She squeezed his hand once, then released it, needing space to breathe. I don't know what tomorrow looks like, she said. Or the day after that. Neither do I, he replied. But tonight showed me something. That pretending can sometimes reveal the truth. She considered that, the way the evening had shifted something inside her. How standing beside him had made her feel less small, less afraid. If you write, she said slowly, I'll read it. A smile touched his mouth, restrained but unmistakable. That's all I hoped for. They walked together a short distance, reluctant but understanding. At her gate, she stopped. The house beyond it was dark, quiet, waiting. Thank you, Daniel, she said, meeting his eyes. For treating me like I mattered. You do, he replied. Whether I'm here or not. He tipped his hat, then turned back toward his horse. Clara watched him go until his figure blended into the mist. Only then did she step inside her home. As she closed the door behind her, the silence felt different than it had before. Still lonely, yes, but not empty. She touched the place at her back where his hand had rested earlier, then smiled softly to herself. For the first time since loss had stripped her life bare, she allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't defined by what she'd lost, but by what she might yet choose.